Welcome to the Process Breakdown Podcast, where we talk about streamlining and scaling operations of your company, getting rid of bottlenecks, and giving your employees all the information they need to be successful at their jobs. Now, let's get started with the show.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, host of the Process Breakdown Podcast, where we talk about streamlining and scaling operations of your company, getting rid of bottlenecks, and giving your staff everything they need to be successful at their job. Before I formally introduce Jacki and Amber here, a couple of past episodes. Past guests include David Allen of Getting Things Done, which was a great episode, Michael Gerber of the E-Myth. Was a great episode, and many, many more you can check out. This episode is actually brought to you by SweetProcess. And if you've had team members ask you the same questions over and over again, and it's maybe the 10th time you spend explaining it, well, there's actually a better way. There's a solution. SweetProcess is a software that makes it drop dead easy to train and onboard new staff, save time with existing staff, and not only do universities, banks, hospitals, medical companies, and software companies use them, but actually first responder government agencies use them in a life or death situations to run their operations. So you could use SweetProcess to document all the repetitive tasks that eat up your precious time so you can focus on growing your team and empowering them to do their best work. There is a 14-day free trial, which no credit card is required. You can go to sweetprocess.com. That's sweet like candy, SWEET process.com. As you can see, Amber and Jacki are nodding with me because they get it. They use it. I'm going to formally introduce Amber Lehmann as co-owner and manager of Mesquite Chiropractic Injury. They actually provide chiropractic care and pain relief and regenerative therapy services for a variety of conditions, including auto injuries, back pain, neck pain, sciatica, and many more. Amber's husband, Dr. Timothy, is actually one of the chiropractors at the clinic, where she has served as a manager since 1998. Mesquite Chiropractic's processes and procedures were largely developed by the retiring COO. That's so sad, Jacki. Jacki, and are now found in SweetProcess, where they're access to streamline operations. Jacki actually used to work for Chase. And, I find in the situation where someone's retiring or moving on, people scramble to capture all of the amazing knowledge in that person's head and to document it. So it's actually kind of a good pressure system to get things done. And so welcome both of you, and thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having us.
So I figured we'd start off and just talk about your company and what you do.
Perfect. Okay. Well, so as you said, we have Mesquite Chiropractic and Injury and Regenerative Medicine of Texas. This is in Mesquite, Texas. It's in Dallas County, just east of Dallas. And we actually took over from the first chiropractor in Mesquite, the late Dr. Dorsey. When my husband was in chiropractic school, he asked, hey, you're in school and I'm wanting to retire, so can you come and take over our practice? And so we were like, well, we don't know anything about that, but okay, we'll do that. And so once my husband retired and received his license, it was kind of an unheard of way to have this transition. But we went in on a Monday morning and Dr. Dorsey left at lunch. And so that was our transition.
Seriously? Wow.
There was no contract. We didn't purchase it. We didn't do anything. He just left at lunch. And so there was our practice.
Did he tell you he was leaving at lunch?
Yeah, well, we knew he was ready. He was really ready. He had been waiting, for a couple of years for him to finish up school. He was even a patient of his while he was in school to help him out. So it was a big transition for us. We were in our young early 20s, and didn't really know, never had owned our own business or had family that owned businesses. So we kind of struggled through, those first several years of figuring out what it is that we really like doing. So one of the things that my husband really enjoys is treating auto injuries like whiplash, really getting into the diagnosis of brain traumatology, anything happening with that. And so he really loves to focus on that part of it and enjoys treating those patients. Although we do treat insurance, cash, medical. In 2019, we ended up integrating. So then we brought on a medical provider. We have a nurse practitioner. We have a supervising physician that's an MD. So they can provide some of those regenerative therapies and more natural ways that kind of fit with the chiropractic philosophy, but still in some of the scope that he's not allowed to do. So that's where we've been in our practice thus far.
Pretty amazing. I mean, it's one of those things that it seems is a great opportunity, right? Someone who has an established practice and is ready. I mean, maybe the transition is not an ideal, but it is what it is. So,
Yes.
but we'll talk about, I mean, that transition, SweetProcess plays into that, which we'll get to, but just give people some context around kind of what the staff looks like at Mesquite Chiropractic.
Yep. So of course, we have our front desk. We have a front desk team member. We do some of our own physical therapy there. So we have a PT tech at the office. We do have a full-time case manager for personal injury. We have a nurse practitioner. And then, of course, my husband's there as the chiropractor. And then I'm there, and Jacki has been there. And so she's done helped with the insurance. And we do have another person who I have brought in to replace me as on day-to-day operations. So she's doing office management. And so she's also going to be taking some of that baton as far as some of the, continuing to keep the processes and procedures updated.
I love it. You have a great, staffing and then systems. So how did you discover SweetProcess?
Well, through the years, and speaking of David Allen, Getting Things Done, love his book, love it, love it. I still use a tickler file. And also the EMF. I mean, both of those, and I understood them. I never knew though how to actually document my processes in a way that was usable. I tried through all the years. I did it. I mean, I did Word documents, I typed it up, but it just wasn't enough. And we weren't using them, so I'm like, I have all this stuff, but we're not using them because they're not written well. It wasn't in a good format. And so when Jacki and I were talking, and I knew she was retired and she's talking about everything that she does, I was like, I need help with that, and so she came in and we kind of pulled her out of retirement, just only a few hours a week, started out until next thing you know, she's there full time, so that's why she's ready to retire for the third time.
You wore her out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wore her
So
out.
you were like, we have these processes, like, I know we need to do it. They're kind of all over the place. They're not organized. They're in different areas. And you asked, Jacki, can you help us kind of streamline and get things together?
Yes, absolutely. So first thing was, how are we going to house them? And so I had been to a course in Dallas called 10,000 Small Businesses that was sponsored by Goldman Sachs.
Yeah, I did that also, actually.
Did you? Yeah.
Yep.
Did you do Emerging Leaders also?
No.
Okay, so I did both 10,000 Small Businesses. I've done Emerging Leaders. Well, in our resources, we have all these resources. So I went searching in my database. What is everybody using? And somebody put on there they were using SweetProcess. I said, okay. So I picked 3 or 4 different software companies, and we looked at them. And then I was like, you know what, this one seems easy to use. It was affordable. You can easily add users. And so I sent that to Jacki, and then she looked at it, and she was the one.
Great.
Yes. And
she's so functional.
Mm-hmm. So
Jacki, you've seen a lot, Jacki. I mean, you worked at Chase. When you saw SweetProcess, what struck you? What did you like about it?
What I really appreciated was a couple of things. One is the review process, so you can keep your procedures evergreen, because that is something that you can struggle with when you're maintaining them more in a Word document. I appreciated the fact that I'm a process flow person. So I like to talk through what the procedure needs to be, find all the breakpoints, this, that, and the other, and then document it. And it really lends itself very well to saying, here's my decision points. What direction am I going now? Having your options. Do I have 3 choices that I'm going to make? So all your decisions, you can map it out. You can follow it through. I just thought that was excellent. It was very easy to use. And then I liked the fact that it had the segregation of procedures, processes, and policies. And so it just seemed to really fit everything that I knew that Amber and Dr. Lehmann needed for their business. And I felt it was something I'd be able to use easily.
The other thing I'll hop in there too that we really like about SweetProcess is the availability to give ideas to SweetProcess. And so we'll email, it's like, hey, is there a way to do that? And they'll say, hey, tell me more. What do you want? What is it you're wanting to accomplish? And then they'll give it to their developers to add it. And then and we find multiple things that we've, kind of brought up that have been added to the software.
That is unique for a company to actually listen and implement it. Like,
Really?
yeah, we'll get to it, and then
Yes.
it never happens.
I'm used to the ask for it
Yes.
and you can get it in a release in 3 years kind of thing. So
Yeah,
it's like
that's
2 days later, Owen says, oh, okay, you can do this now. I'm like, dang, that's
Yeah.
great.
Yes.
they're very responsive.
Mhm.
So how did you use it? So now you had all these kind of fragmented things. You're doing them in different areas. How did you actually then implement SweetProcess? What did you do first?
What we did is I actually started working at the front desk. I did have access to the procedures that they had documented, but what I did work more through was they had a list of tasks that the front desk was supposed to complete daily, weekly, monthly. And I really worked through those to say, okay, explain to me how you do this. And then I'd go, why do you do that? And I know that Amber got sick of me saying, but how do they know they're supposed to do that? So it really was working about, what prompts this? Where does it fit in the chain? So would really work through and then say, okay, here's what I think it is. And I would do two different things. Sometimes if it was more complicated, I actually would do a process flow for it. Or when we started doing the osteoarthritis injections on the knee, totally new. So then I process flowed all of that and then said, okay, let me go ahead and do it in a procedure. But for the other stuff like front desk, taking a payment, taking a phone call, I would really just write up the procedure. I would review it with Amber and another employee. And then we would go through and then say, this is right, this is wrong, this is right, this is wrong. So easy. I think that's one of the things that I like best about SweetProcess is they go, no, actually, you need to do step 6 before step 4. And you just slide it. Whereas when you're doing a Word document, cut and paste, the format always changes. Frustrating. But we will really go through it and then say, is this the process that we're doing? And is this the correct way to do it? And so we would nail that procedure, publish it, and then, assign it to the teams. We created the teams so that people would have access to the procedures they needed. So we relied on several things, and I've sort of drifted away from some of it, but we definitely used the teams to make sure the right people have access to the right procedures and not too much. I was using tags a lot. And that kind of helps me sometimes to organize thoughts. We were starting to work with a collection agency, so I just used a collection tag so that I can sort by that and find what I need. But then I found it so easy to just go in and search on the word that you want. And as long as the word isn't claim or something, I can pretty much get to where I need. So that was very helpful. So I used that structure and just worked through them, all the way through and made sure we had connections. One of the things that I sort of keep as a rule is don't make a procedure too big. Because if somebody starts going, oh, and that's in step 47, you've lost them. And I also wanted to make it where if we changed something, let's say we changed who we're using for a credit card processor. I didn't want to have to worry about the 15 procedures where I talk about taking a payment and using a credit card. So I really appreciated that in SweetProcess, you could link to a procedure. So I would keep it very streamlined. And if it said, here's how to take a payment, here's how to update a travel card, something like that, I would link to those procedures. Then if we made a change, I only needed to change that core central procedure and not everything else. So I think those were really helpful. And again, I just worked through team member after team member documenting what was needed. And then we used the policies was really helpful. So we documented all the policies. That was one of the ones that was probably easier to do because Amber Tim really knew what they wanted for their policies. It was interesting. We added one later, and that's after SweetProcess added the AI functionality. And I said, let's see if I put this topic in, what we get for a policy. And it was like, Oh, and I think there's probably 3 suggestions that it came as AI. We said, oh, we hadn't thought about that. Let's include them. I've tried AI on the procedure side. It hasn't worked as well for us, just because sometimes it
They're
was
very
like wrong
specific. Your
perspective.
procedures are probably super
Yes,
specific.
yeah, it's like the wrong
Yes.
perspective, but it still gives you a thought process to go through. Don't forget to do that.
What kind of policies did you document? What are a couple examples?
Attendance, employee conduct,
Email.
PTO,
Yeah.
just all
Yes.
those things that is how you want your
That would
employees
have
to
in
be.
your office
Not how they
policy.
do their job, but how they conduct themselves. So those
And
types of
it's
things.
helpful too to make sure, as we can look to see to make sure everybody's signed off. So when we're onboarding, the SweetProcess was a really big part of our onboarding because we didn't have to sit with somebody for 2 weeks. We would sit with them for a little while, let them go read some procedures and for sure all the policies and understand, ask any questions and sign off on all of those policies, which of course you have to have the assigned policies.
And additionally, we do use the processes, and it took us a little while to go, wait, procedure, process, what's the difference? And whether we're using it the right way or not, I don't know, but it works for us. So what I have as a process is I'll have something that just says
Office
front
equipment.
desk necessarily, or something like that. And then every procedure that is related to that is there so that they can go, wait, oh, I think it was something called blah, 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 but I'm not sure. They can look at the processes, scan through and go, oh, that's the one I need. And then they can click on it and go right to the procedure. So it can help drive them to where they need to be. And then we've also, most of the procedures are not, they don't create tasks that need to be followed. I mean, they're there, you know what you need to do. But then we created separate task lists. And so those were the things that Amber wanted to make sure the front desk accomplished every day. And so we created task lists as well for them to go through and mark off. I did the cleaning for the day. I balanced the checkbook. I blah, 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 everything that they would need to do.
So the
that
task list will
wouldn't
have
need
the
to go ask.
individual kind of procedures they need to follow. So
Yes.
it's like opening, closing, do
Yes.
this,
Yes.
do that, and
Yeah.
then they can follow that procedure
Yep.
for that.
Yeah.
Morning and afternoon, and then they just click it off, and then we can see that they've finished everything. It just keeps them to make sure that helps them to not miss anything.
And that
I
was
think-
something that had been a paper form before, that they would have a checklist of what they needed to do.
I'd like to talk about best practices for a second. Jacki, you mentioned something about not making the procedures too long. I find also what's very helpful is to have someone who's never done the process actually be the one helping create the process, because it really kind of shores up that process. Because someone who's done it for a long time maybe skip steps. So best practice could be have someone who's never done it actually help with the documentation. You mentioned not making it too long. Sometimes when it's too long, I find they're really two different procedures that's not like all one, right?
Everything I thought at the moment, yes.
What are are there any other common practices along with, okay, don't make it too long, have someone help? What else do you use when you're actually creating the process or putting it in?
I'd say along the way of my banking career, one time when I was writing procedures, very long time ago at a bank in Virginia, it was right at the 5th grade level. And so that is something that I try to do, is not have somebody go, what? And then I will try to read it to go, is that really clear? Would anybody that read that understand what it is that we're asking them to do? And if it's not clear, then I didn't write it well and I need to move on. So try to avoid ambiguity. Don't use big words. So, they all keep it simple kind of theory.
Yeah. And it's what's cool about it is like if you hand it to someone, like you said, they immediately can say, okay, wait, I'm stuck here. And then you could revise the process, or wait, it's out of order. So like the best way to test it is just have someone who's never done it do it.
Yes.
And it actually tests it, right? I'd love to hear what's been the biggest game changer for you. We'll talk about patient onboarding and staff onboarding. You already mentioned the staff onboarding piece is like, okay, before we used to, spend hours and have to sit with them and review everything. Now you could just assign them, hey, review this. And then you can kind of just check to make sure everything makes sense. What about from the And so it sounds like it saved you, lots of time on the staff onboarding side. What about on the patient onboarding? How has that been game changing?
Actually, that's a good question. Jacki also took us through a software change 2 years ago, which was a big thing, a big change. So we have a lot of the documents that would relate to the patients in SweetProcess. The patient is not necessarily involved in that, but all the processes for the software, where now we started having them fill out paperwork on a tablet, and so how was that saved, and how was that put into their patient chart? What do we do when faxes come in, and how do we do all of that? So all of that was housed in SweetProcess for the new software. So after Jacki wrote hundreds of procedures for the old software, then we switched software. So we got to write hundreds of more processes or procedures.
But I think that was another plus with SweetProcess, because then we had everything documented for the most part.
Yes.
We didn't have the provider procedures documented, but we had everything else documented. So then it was like, we're going to a new system. And I thought they were kind of strange in that they like to train you after you've converted. And that is totally not normal. So I'm going, okay, well, I'm going to learn everything beforehand, because we need to know what we're doing the very first day. And so having the whole list of procedures and then saying, because what I was doing is I was reading the software systems, all their documentation. I go, oh, it does this. Oh, it does this. Oh, it does this. How great is that? And I thought, but wait, how do we need it to work for us and what we need to do? So I did a different mindset, and I really started with all the SweetProcess procedures that said, hey, here's how we check a patient in. Here's the things that we do. Based on what I've learned about this system, how do we want to change it? And so then I had the old system procedure, and then I was able to just duplicate it, change the name to ECW. Oops, wasn't going to say it, but ECW procedure. And then I was able to make sure that everything that we had for controls, for balancing, for customer touch, all of that was still there. I just updated it for the new system. And so it was a wonderful tool for that exercise. And occasionally we still, we've had to retain the old system, and there's still times we need to refer back to the old ones as well. But I think that helped so much. And we actually had a trainer come in from the new system, and they said they'd never had a client as prepared for a conversion as we were, because we were like, this is what we're going to do, dang it, let us at it. So I think SweetProcess was a huge plus for that, just for having us prepared.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like for me, as a client or customer or patient of somewhere else, they may not know, right, that you use SweetProcess, but I go in and I go, these people have it together. They're organized. I get great care or service or whatever. It's because of they have systems, right?
Yes.
And I remember being impressed by a company that I went into a couple weeks ago, and I just asked, right? And they're like, yeah, we have everything dialed in. And so they may not know, but they know because they're getting great care, and things are getting done that need to get done. Things aren't forgotten, and those kind of things. So it's kind of like you just get a sense. They may not know you're following this, but the intake process, I don't know if you get, patients reporting, oh, this is so smooth, or this is so easy, or you are organized. I don't know if you get those comments, but it's definitely, there, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yes, for sure. Yes, absolutely.
I think probably the biggest challenge is it is so much easier for the staff to just say, Amber, Jacki, how do I do this? And they actually, when I left, they made up T-shirts that said, it's in SweetProcess, because, but my answer is usually, it's in SweetProcess, but let me tell you how to do it, blah, 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 blah. So we're trying to wean away from that and have them actually look it up in SweetProcess and do it. But it helps because I can't remember everything. I'm an old lady, and there's a lot of things that happen. So it helps me to have it in SweetProcess and go, wait, what is the rule for how long it's been since a patient was last in, and when do we call it a returning old patient kind of thing? Because I can't remember it all either.
It is a joke in our office because either one of us, if they ask either one of us, and mine is usually a question. I think they take it as as me telling them to go to look in SweetProcess, but I'm like, is it in SweetProcess? Basically, that's what I want you to look at first. Is it in there? And then they'll come back. Oh yeah, it is in there. Okay, good. Or no, it's not in there. Okay, well, we need to write one.
It's the first, first defense is
Yes.
check SweetProcess. And I do find, we use it as well. I love the searchability aspect. And
Yes.
Jacki, you mentioned that because you can search and obviously the tagging helps. I'd love to know how it's changed your typical day. So before SweetProcess, how has it changed your typical day now that you have it?
I would say for me, it is so nice to know that I actually have something, we have something documented. If somebody says, how do I file a lien? I was like, well, go look in SweetProcess and see if it's in there. I mean, and it always is the first answer. Like, go see if it's in there, and then follow it and then see if it doesn't. I mean, if you get stuck anywhere, tell me, because that means we need a new step. So that changed everything. Because otherwise, I would stop what I was doing. I would go and sit with somebody and I'll go, okay, here's how you do it. Go to this website and go in here.
It would
And
disrupt your whole day because you
30
just be
minutes,
interrupted.
that would take me 30 minutes or whatever to stop and do it. So to be able to say, go and look first and see if it's in there and follow it and let me know if you get stuck, that changed everything for me. It was really good. And that really was always my answer. Even now, if I'm not there every day, I'll get a questions like, and a lot of times I'll answer, but then I was like, also it's in SweetProcess, and they're like, oh, okay. And it really helps because people will stop asking you if they know what you're going to say.
Jacki, what about you?
Well, I didn't have a role before we started working on SweetProcess, so that's a harder one for me to say. But it did, as we had more things documented, it made it easier to document subsequent procedures. And it definitely was a huge tool. And I thought about that when I went in one day and they said, oh, guess what? We're going to a new system. And I said, yay, get to write new procedures. And then I went home and I thought, well, maybe I should tell them my experience with system conversions. And I said, well, I can do this, 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 this. What do you want? And they said, yes, all of that.
Everything.
And so then I truly appreciated what we had in SweetProcess because that even helped to define our testing methodology. It helped a whole lot to define our business requirements and things like that. So if I had been there before and that had been my role with system support, SweetProcess would have been the real tool because that's how I knew enough about how the system worked or how they wanted or the pain points that needed to be corrected to be able to document business requirements for the new system. And I think, that's not their expertise at all. I've done it multiple times at predecessor companies, but it's not their expertise. So I think probably their list of business requirements was like 15 or 20. Yes. And then I said, from procedures, what about this? What about this? What about this? And we end up with 300 different requirements, which really helped whittle down the system that we went to.
Amber, I want to talk about freak out factor for a second, meaning, okay, picture Jacki leaving and you don't have SweetProcess, or a staff leaving, SweetProcess versus you have it. Talk about, maybe the spectrum of freak out based on that.
That's good. Well, I would say I'm very familiar with that because before, I mean, it's only been 3 years, right? Since Jacki came in and started helping us do all of these document the procedures. So we've been in business for 27, and so that leaves me 24 years of freak out factor. No, if somebody left, I'm like, I know what I'm doing for the next 2 weeks. 2 weeks, my life stopped, and I was sat with somebody, sat at the front desk, or I sat with an insurance case manager, or I sat with a PI case manager. So that was that. I'm very familiar with that, which I'm so grateful now that has changed. Where when somebody does come in, and we have had some new staff members here in the last 6 months or so, and to have the documentation, and I always go back on their 90-day review and I ask them about onboarding, and I've had several of our team members say it was the best onboarding they ever had.
Yeah. I want, first of all, thank you both for sharing your journey story. It's been really instructive. I love how you do it because anyone listening can follow similar practices and help their own business. The last question I have is just the next step someone listening should take to start to streamline operations. So maybe I'll just take one from each of you. What's the next step? Someone listening, like, I know I need to streamline operations. What's the next step they should take to get started?
I'll go first because Jacki is more of an expert on this. But I will say that when I was in one of my business classes, I said I know I have to do something. I wanted to do video. We actually have done some videos since in the last year. But and I did forget we do have one offshore employee. I forgot he's a admin assistant, and we did videos, and he has access to SweetProcess, which helped him also, even with a little bit of a language barrier. It was still easy because we have pictures in SweetProcess. It helps. I remember being in a class, and I said I need to figure out something, whether I'm going to use, I don't know what platform I'm going to use, but I need to do all this. And he said the time to do it was 25 years ago. I was like, I know. So I would say don't wait, start now. And also
because it could be overwhelming, so people hesitate to do it.
Oh, yes. Or they've tried all different things. They've got all kind of different systems. We've had binders and folders and all. We've had all kind of Word documents. We've had all kind of ways, but just not effective. So I would say get started. And if you don't have somebody to help you that has some expertise, like I was very fortunate that Jacki came in and helped and with her expertise. But if you don't have that, find either somebody or some other way to go look up how to write these procedures. Because when I first started, when she would say, okay, we need to write this down, and can you just put it like in a Word document? And then I would have to think, because I would give her the first ones, and then she would come back with 10 questions. And I'm like, okay, so the next time I wrote it, I was like, I know she's going to ask, so let me go ahead and try to figure it out. So it helped me go through the process. So I would say any kind of help that you have would be a good thing, just to get, because now I'm better than I was 3 years ago. I could write a procedure now, much better than I could 3 years ago, but I needed that help for somebody to show me how to do it. So I would say start now, don't wait, and get a little bit of help.
Jacki, what about you? If someone's listening, what's some of the first steps they should take to streamline operations?
I think finding a great tool anybody, I have places where I volunteer and they struggle with their procedures. And I said, let me show you SweetProcess, because I do think it's a fabulous tool. Anytime that you move away from tracking it on paper, because how do you know if somebody is looking at the right version?
Yes.
So that is the crux of it, is knowing that you've got control on it and that you can update it as needed, and everybody's looking at the same thing.
Yes.
And are they looking at it? So that's a plus. But then don't overwhelm you. I mean, if you walk in and you go, I need to document this whole clinic, it's like, whoa.
Yes.
When my daughter was in second grade, they did something on project management. And there was some project that I was struggling with, and she said, Mom, just take what you need to do, write a list, and do a little bit at a time. And I thought, thank you. And that is great advice from a second grader. But really, keep track of the big list that you need to accomplish, but don't scare yourself by looking at that. Then just say, what my goal is to document this aspect. You feel better about it, and then you can move on. You can start tackling.
Love it. One step at a time, one procedure at a time. Don't get overwhelmed.
Yep.
Thank you both for sharing. Everyone can check out Mesquite Chiropractic at mesquitechiro.com and learn more at SweetProcess. And we'll see everyone next time. And thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to the Process Breakdown Podcast. Before you go, quick question. Do you want a tool that makes it easy to document processes, procedures, and/or policies for your company so that your employees have all the information they need to be successful at their job? If yes, sign up for a free 14-day trial of SweetProcess. No credit card is required to sign up. Go to sweetprocess.com, sweet like candy, and process like process.com. Go now to sweetprocess.com and sign up for your risk-free 14-day trial.
Hi, this is Owen, the CEO and co-founder here at SweetProcess. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast interview, actually, you know what I want you to do? Go ahead and leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. That way we get more people aware of the good stuff that you get here on this podcast. Again, go on to iTunes and leave us a 5-star review. Looking forward to reading your review. Have a good day.